Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Before we begin, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. It really does help. You can also join my Patreon. We are in the midst of a very important fundraiser. I will talk about that at the end of the video. I have a really special episode for you today. I'm going to be sharing with you my phone call with some of the victims at the heart of this story, this terrible murder story that took place in my hometown of Cedar City, Utah. One of the topics we discuss all the time here on Dark Hearts is the death penalty. I've stated before that I used to be a strong proponent for the death penalty, but the older I've gotten and the more I've learned, the longer I've lived, I haven't really changed my mind, but I now kind of sit on the fence. One, it costs much more to execute a person than it does to let them sit in prison because the legal process is so involved. Prisoners sentenced to die get thousands and thousands of attorney hours, all paid for by the state. So that's one. Two, sometimes I think the death penalty, I think death is too easy. Sometimes I think it's better for prisoners to have a long, miserable life in jail, living every day knowing that they're missing out on their lives. They're missing out on going to eat a good burger or, watching a ball game. They're not getting to do any of the things the rest of us get to do. Three, I think the death penalty system is completely broken. And if we're going to have executions, the system needs a complete overhaul. So I'm admitting outright, I'm on the fence. The majority of the states here in America have not carried out executions in many years. It's become a very controversial subject. It's not so controversial here in Utah, which I've told you in other episodes is still very much the Wild West. There are things here in Utah that are very different from every other state in the country, and our attitude towards executions is rivaled only by states like Texas and Mississippi. 5 days before I wrote this episode, so just about a month ago, Utah prosecutors filed a motion to go forward with our first execution here in Utah since 2010, and that was the infamous execution of Ronnie Lee Gardner. I covered that execution on this channel when the channel was called Dining with Death. This is the thumbnail for that video if you want to watch it. It's in the series where I talk about the crime and then I show you and taste the last meal of the executed person. But here it is now, 2024, 14 years after that last execution, and Utah is ready to put someone to death again. This is also a story about a murdered Indigenous woman. And as we have spoken about many times here, we try to focus on MMIW, missing and murdered Indigenous women, every few months because that segment of our population is murdered at a much higher rate than any other. This is a really sad story. It's a disturbing story, and it's a story that makes me really angry. This is the story of the murder of Claudia Ben and her killer, Tabaron Dave Honey, who looks like he will be the next to die. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's begin. I want to start this episode with a news story out of Salt Lake City that I simply cannot believe did not get more press coverage. There was definitely some kind of effort to keep this situation quieter than it should have been. Even with this news story, it's like the only one I could find, and it really didn't make many waves. What happened here in Utah some years ago actually should have been a bombshell. Without any kind of public input and without informing the public at all, the Utah State Prison basically dismantled its death row. What does that mean? It means that the 7 men currently on death row in Utah are treated like every other inmate. Did you know that? Do you think the average Utahn knows that? Absolutely not. When I think of death row, I think of men and once in a while a woman sitting in a concrete cell for 23 hours a day. I think of them being segregated. I think of them getting like an hour a week outside. Nope, not in Utah, because without any sort of announcement or fanfare or public input, like I said, Utah began treating its death row inmates very differently many years ago.
Utah's death penalty law remains on the books after lawmakers turned back an effort to abolish capital punishment. But those same lawmakers might be surprised to learn the Utah Department of Corrections has already dismantled its death row.
Now, thanks to a KSL investigation and also the Cold podcast team, we now know why. Dave Cawley explains.
This guy has no conscience. He's a killer, a cold-blooded killer.
In 1984, Walter Wood escaped from the Utah State Prison.
This guy's bad. He's as bad as they come. We got to find him real quick.
He'd spent time on death row, but his death sentence was overturned on appeal. That's when prison staff let Wood out of maximum security, setting the stage for escape.
It appears there was no negligence, and no disciplinary action is going to be taken pending a full report.
Police recaptured Wood after a manhunt, but it happened again. Gerald Brown escaped in 1990. Like Wood, he had been sent to death row but won an appeal, which allowed him out of max.
Brown, shown here in 1978, is a convicted double murderer serving a life sentence.
Brown had used tools from the prison's plumbing shop to create a hidden compartment in a state utility truck.
When an employee drove outside the gate, they made off with the vehicle.
SWAT teams caught Brown near Sundance, but not before he tried to shoot a campground host with a stolen gun. These were dangerous and embarrassing lapses for the Utah Department of Corrections. They help explain why, for more than 30 years, this Supermax building has housed Utah's condemned. It's called Uinta 1, but in 2019, prison staff moved 5 of Utah's 7 death row inmates out of it. KSL first made that discovery while working on Season 2 of the Cold podcast. It wasn't clear why, so last year we asked Corrections Director Brian Nielsen to explain.
Right now there are 7 incarcerated that are sentenced to death.
He told us it was due to an old policy from 2005 called Last Chance.
They have to earn their way to some place that they have more opportunities.
Like Nielsen said, moving to less restrictive housing.
We've had a couple make it that far, but it's taken 13, 14 years to get there.
We now know that last statement wasn't entirely accurate. Nielsen wouldn't show us the last chance policy after our interview. We fought to win this copy using Utah's open records law. Turns out last chance didn't say what Nielsen claimed. It didn't offer death row inmates a way out of max. That change was much more recent. In 2018, the prison captain in charge of Uinta 1 sent this letter to the warden. He suggested eliminating death row altogether, and the prison did just that without revealing it publicly.
We keep our guard up all the time while looking for opportunities to help people advance.
5 of the 7 men serving death sentences in Utah are today treated like most other inmates. They can move around more, work in prison shops, and are separated from society by fewer fences. And maybe that's no big deal. A New York-based prison reform group called the Vera Institute of Justice spent years working with Utah's prison bosses. Vera issued this report in 2020. It criticized the practice of housing death row inmates in max, saying they are no more violent than anyone else. Right or wrong, Utah didn't need to act on Vera's report because it had already dismantled death row. Dave Cawley, KSL 5 News.
All right, thanks a lot, Dave. Well, the Department of Corrections tells us they're now focusing on housing inmates based on their behavior, not their crime.
I'm kind of at a loss for words. That is shocking. It's shocking to uncover the fact that Utah basically has no death row, even though there are death row inmates. That's not the way that's supposed to work. It does appear from that news story that there was some backpedaling, but no, that did not become the big news story that it should have. When the judicial system puts a prisoner on death row, the legal voice has spoken, and that prisoner is supposed to be on death row. So if Utah State is going to take away its death row, that's something the public should know about. Now, let's talk a little bit about the death penalty. I'm going to name these quickly just so you can hear your state so you know. The following states now have no death penalty at all: Washington, Hawaii, Colorado, Rhode Island, New Mexico, North Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, New York, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and Alaska. So that is 22. No death penalty anymore in those states. There are 6 states that have all executions on pause as they reevaluate whether or not they're going to have executions there. Those 6 states are California, Oregon, Arizona, Tennessee, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Then there are the states that still have the death penalty: Nevada, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Indiana, Kentucky, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, and of course, Utah. So there are now less states that have the death penalty than do not have the death penalty. And that number increases with the states that have put executions on pause. States that execute are now in the minority. 4 of the states that still have the death penalty have not executed anyone in more than 20 years. Now I'm going to give you some numbers that are even more telling. Michigan, Rhode Island, Wisconsin, Maine, North Dakota, and Minnesota have not executed anyone in over 100 years. New Hampshire, Hawaii, Massachusetts, Alaska, Vermont, DC, West Virginia, Iowa, New York, New Jersey, and Kansas have not executed anyone in over 50 years. So as you can see, execution it's a dying thing. Oh, that was really, I swear that wasn't on purpose. Then there are too many states to name that haven't executed anyone in over 20 years or over 10 years. In fact, the only states that have had an execution in this decade are South Dakota, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Texas, Missouri, Mississippi, Arizona, and Florida. That's in the last decade. Executions are becoming less and less popular with the public, and our legislatures are feeling the pressure. Now, the state of Utah has filed the paperwork to put Tabarone Honey's execution on the schedule. There is a lot that has to happen after that. This execution isn't going to happen anytime soon. First off, here in Utah, we still have the damn firing squad. Our last execution, Ronnie Lee Gardner, in 2013 was firing squad, like it was the damned 1800s. Prisoners here in Utah have the right to choose their method of execution, and they get those 2 choices. It's either firing squad or lethal injection. So what is Tabarone going to ask for? Is he going to ask for the firing squad? We don't have a gas chamber, so those are the 2 options. This is really just the first step that the state takes in getting closer to an actual execution. Let's go back in time now and let's talk about the horrible crime that led to all of this, and it is horrible. The people at the heart of today's story are Indigenous Americans. They are members of the Paiute tribe, and most of them are from the Kaibab Indian Reservation. That's still what it's called, which sits along the Southern Great Basin and Kanab Creek. The reservation runs through Utah and Arizona. I went to school from the time I was 5 to the time I was in high school with a lot of Paiute kids and a lot of Navajo kids. Last names like Sosi, Yazzie, Little, Bidoni, Begay, Nez, Pikyavit, those are all very familiar names to me. Both Paiute and Navajo people are very, very family oriented. In some ways, even more so than in other cultures. I know, like, in the Mexican culture, the Chinese culture, they're very, very family oriented. It's at least on par with that, if not more so. The families are very, very close. Because the Paiute and Navajo peoples still live on reservations in this part of the world, there is often like a family home where grandparents, parents, kids, and grandkids all live together. Even when they live in town and they do not live on the reservation, they will often have like one big family home where there will be several generations of the same family living there. The women especially have very, very strong bonds. Now that I'm 53, I've noticed the Paiute and Navajo girls that I went to school with, and I'm like friends with them on Facebook, they are still very close to their moms. They're with their mom all the time. Their mom tends their kids. Their mom is their friend. They go do things together, and sometimes with the dads too. But I just notice it especially with their moms. They're also very, very close to their grandmothers. This is a very matriarchal society where the older women play a very important role and the older women are to be respected. Both tribes have absolutely beautiful cultures, and one of my favorite things to do is to go to a powwow every now and again. I haven't been to one in a few years, but they are spectacular. The costumes blow me away every single time I go. The food is amazing. I love the music and the drumming. It's a culture that is rooted here in southern Utah, and I'm going to be very honest about this. It's a culture that does not get the respect it deserves. The people often do not get the respect they deserve. We just had a big battle over whether or not to change the high school's name from the Red Men. There are people sitting on the city council in my hometown right now fighting to bring back the name that they decided to take away because the name is racist. Red Men is a slur for Native American people, and there are people that are so daft that they don't think the tribes should be the people that decide whether or not they want to have that as a mascot. You know, there are just a lot of white people that don't know when to shut their mouths. If you are not the race of people being discussed, shut your mouth. If you are not the gender of the people being discussed, shut your mouth. Your opinion is not as valid as someone who belongs to the group when talking about that group. Neither is mine. And sometimes as white people, we just need to shut the up. We are so entitled. We think we have to insert our opinion into everything. And there are other cultures that just don't want to hear it. So officially, the high school that I went to is now called the Reds, but they just re-voted. This little group of wackos from my hometown is trying to change it back to a racist name. It happened here in St. George a couple years ago. The college used to be called Dixie State. Well, in the South, Dixie has a very negative connotation. The people here in Utah are like, well, that's the South. We're not in the South. But the people that you want to come to the college here are. You want to use a name that's associated with racism as your college? And now there's this big group of people here in St. George who are like, everything's woke now. Everything's woke now. You don't even know what that word means. You don't even know what woke means. It's just about respect. Just have respect for other people. If you don't want people to name your high school the Crackers, don't name your high school the Red Men. You guys know I get sidetracked because I'm very passionate about this kind of thing. It isn't about wokeness. It isn't about progressiveness. It's about respect. It's about having respect for the people that inhabit the earth with us, treating each other with kindness and respect. It's not about politics. It's not about wokeness. Be respectful to people you want to be respectful of you, period. Back to the story. I'm on a tangent today because this story is very close to my heart, and doing these interviews was close to my heart, and I'm a little fired up today. You're shocked, I know. It is very important to me to bring you these stories, to keep the names of the victims alive, and to bring awareness to the very real problem of a high murder rate among Indigenous women. This is the culture I grew up with. I have a lot of friends that are Native Americans, and these things matter to me. If they don't matter to you, I guess work on yourself. In around 1995, Tabaron Honey begins dating Carol Pickuvit. The relationship was solid for about 2 years, but in the third year, the couple started to have a lot of arguments. During the relationship, the couple had a daughter. I'm going to call the daughter TH. By 1998, the relationship had come to an end, and Tabaron was living with a new girlfriend near Cedar City. Carol Pickuvit and her daughter TH were living with Carol's mother, this woman, Claudia Ben. Carol's sister Benita and Benita's 2 toddler girls were also living with Claudia, so this was a house full of women. On July 9th, 1998, Tabaron called Carol multiple times, demanding that she come straight to his girlfriend's house. It's not clear exactly what the details of this fight were over, but Tabaron was angry and he was basically ordering Carol to come and see him at his new girlfriend's home. Carol told Tabaron that she had to work and she wasn't going to miss her shift at work just to come and see him. Tabaron then told Carol that if she didn't come and see him at his girlfriend's house, he would kill not only Carol, but her 2 young nieces, the 2 toddler girls that belonged to her sister Benita. He would kill them as well. Now, I need to be clear, these threats were nothing new for Carol. Tabaron had threatened her so many times, she had heard it all before. He was going to kill her. He was going to kill her mom, her sister, her nieces. He was an angry man that made a lot of threats. Besides all of that, Carol did have to be at work. So did Benita. Carol and Benita worked nights so they could leave their young children at home with their mom, Claudia, and she could watch over her grandkids. Tabaron continued to call Carol as she got ready to leave for work. Each time he threatened her, each time he said terrible, abusive things to her. But again, sadly, this was nothing new for Carol. And so she and her sister Benita went off to work as they usually would. They left the family home around 10:30 that night. And they left their mom, Claudia, at home with the babies. Tabarrone continued to call the house even after Carol had left for work, and he last called around 11:30 that night. He was in a rage. He was screaming and shouting, and he was out of control. Tabarrone did something that he had not done in the past. He put his threats into action. He called a cab company, which back in 1998, I was surprised to hear we even had a cab company in Cedar City. I wasn't living there at the time. And around 12:15 in the morning, the cab dropped Tabarrone off at Claudia Ben's house. 5 minutes later, a neighbor of Claudia's called 911 at 12:20 a.m. because this neighbor heard glass breaking and they heard screaming. Police arrived at Claudia's house and saw that someone had thrown a rock through the sliding glass door in order to get into the house. Police drew their weapons and began giving verbal commands for everyone in the house to come out with their hands up. The officers in front of the house then saw into the garage, and they saw Tabarrone come walking out of the door that goes from the garage into the house. They shouted at him to put his hands up, and when he did, the police officers saw that his hands and his forearms were covered in blood. When the police shouted, "Where is all the blood coming from?" Tabarrone calmly answered them, "I stabbed her. I killed her with a knife." The police officers then arrested Tabarrone and placed him in the back of a police car. They slowly made their way inside. What they found, it's really horrific. And if you're part of the family that does not want to hear these details, I would jump forward a minute or so. Claudia Ben was lying face down in the home. She was partially naked. Next to her body lay a large, bloody butcher-style kitchen knife. Blood pooled on the floor around her neck. Her throat had been slit from ear to ear, and she had a large bite mark on her left arm. This was the attack of a monster. I'm not going to go into great detail here, but Claudia's genitalia had been mutilated with the knife. Tabarrone would later admit he was planning to save Claudia, but when he realized she was dead, he decided he wasn't going to do that. As if all of this is not horrific enough, during the murder, the 3 little girls had wandered into the crime scene and they were covered, as the police report says, from head to toe in blood. This is what I mean when I say sometimes I think the death penalty is too easy, and I'm also curious to know why this man is still alive in Gen Pop. I'm being honest about that. Without the protection of death row, after killing a grandmother in front of her grandbabies, and then I know I probably shouldn't say things like that, but I'm not going to sit here and lie about the way I feel. The cops at this scene were absolutely horrified, and I have heard talk that at least 2 of them really struggled after this event. The state of Utah charged Tabarrone with aggravated murder. Tabarrone quickly waived his right to a jury trial and went right into the sentencing phase. There was no denying what he had done, and he knew it. I won't bore you with the legal jargon, but I read the actual filings, and the real reason Tabarrone didn't want a jury trial, it was because he didn't want everyone to hear what he had done. He didn't want to have to sit in the courtroom and face people while he listened to the attorneys describe the despicable, horrible, cowardly acts he had committed. The judge made sure Tabarrone understood that without a jury, he, the judge, would be deciding if Tabarrone got the death penalty and he alone. Tabarrone said he understood, and he was still willing to waive his right to a jury. The judge then found Tabarrone guilty of burglary, object and forcible sodomy, as well as the murder. The judge went on to say that because of the aggravating circumstances, this made Tabarrone eligible for the death penalty. The sentencing took 2 days. During that time, the state emphasized the harm that Tabarrone had done not only to Claudia and her granddaughter, but to the entire family and that community. Tabarrone's only defense was that he was drunk at the time. He also tried to say it was a mistake because he was so young. He was only 22 at the time of the murder. You're not excused for murder. You know what's right and wrong when you're 22. In 2002, Tabarrone appealed his death sentence, but the court upheld the judge's initial sentence. He tried to withdraw his jury sentencing waiver as well, stating that his jailhouse lawyer, as he called him, convinced him he should go with just a judge instead of a jury. It didn't matter. After a crime like this, let's be honest, everyone wants a man like this dead. But more importantly, the law had been applied properly and the sentence stood. I contacted Carol Pikiewicz and explained to her that I was doing an episode on this event and that I wanted to give her a chance to speak. I'm so grateful that these two sisters are willing to speak about their mom and about this situation. So let's give them the chance to talk about what this has all been like for them.
How are you?
I'm good.
Well, I just wanted to call and give you guys kind of this opportunity to talk a little bit about your mom and how this has all affected you with all this coming back in the news again. I'm sure it's not a great experience.
Yeah. It was July 10th, 98.
July 10th, 98. And have you had to go before the parole board or do anything like that since?
No. Yeah. Well, I know he's had his he calls me and he gave me the heads up that they were doing some, I think 14 days something, and that his attorneys or something were trying to get a victim
impact statement. Yeah.
From me.
So do you still talk to him? Do you still take his calls?
Yeah, only because, you know, the way my mom was like, with my daughter, she said that she doesn't want to, like, how would you say it? She didn't want me to, you know, keep her from his side of the family.
Oh, okay.
So I never really did because I was dealing with, you know, with her death, and then my daughter was, I think, 2 years. Well, she was almost 2 when he started going. When they took it to court, she was almost 2. And you know, then his family ended up having her from when she was 8 because I was really, like, I went off the deep end and was being, you know, straight up drinking and stuff.
Oh, I understand that. I'm sure it was so hard.
I was telling my dad about it because he told me that that they were doing that 14-day thing, and so I talked to my dad about it, and my dad said that he quoted something from the Bible where an eye for an eye, so he's got to die for what he did.
Right.
Yeah, and my dad don't want, that's my dad's thinking, he don't want, you know, him to get out.
Well, no, I don't think so. I think he's, you know, he's probably where he needs to be, and justice has got to be served for your mom. How's your daughter handling it?
Well, my daughter's she was dealing with some, you know, private problems. Yeah. So he's trying to get a hold of her. Yeah, I think he was trying to call her today, I think, or yesterday. I don't know. But yeah, he's wanting to see what she thinks and all.
Has he said anything to you guys about the being set up for execution? Has he talked about taking him? You know, in the state of Utah, they get to choose how they want to die.
Yeah.
Has he said anything about that?
He didn't say how he wanted to, but he said he was ready to.
He's ready to end it and be done with it.
Yeah.
He's been locked up for a long time.
Yeah, 26 years.
26 years. What would you want people to know about your mom?
Well, my mom was a good person. Yeah, she struggled in the beginning, you know, of her life. You know, she met my dad in the late 60s, and they had my older sister, 69. They had me, 70. And then they had my sister, 73.
Okay.
And my parents were, you know, in the beginning, they were alcoholics. Now my dad's sober.
Oh, I love that.
My mom ended up going because she didn't graduate high school. So she was living, we were living in Phoenix from 75 to 80, then moved back here to my dad's house in 80. Then my mom and dad split up, and my mom, you know, went back up to Cedar and went back to adult ed and got her high school diploma. Then she went to SUU, graduated from there, or transferred, because then she was at the U of U. Then she was helping, women. I can't remember what women's crisis or some little thing up in the U that she went and she was a part of. She worked there, but she was also got her Bachelor of Science.
Oh, I love that.
Because she went and she turned around and went and became an alcoholic counselor. She wanted to do something with AA or with people who were having hard times with, the drinking and stuff. So that's when she...
Fantastic.
We just ended up still drinking. He was still doing, the drugs and stuff. And I think we got together in July. So by September, we had come down here to Arizona, my dad's house, to visit. And he was drinking, and he ended up beating me up out here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's...
How do you feel about, obviously when I do the episode, I'll talk a little bit about the details of the night and the terrible things that he did. How do you feel about it? What do you want to have happen?
I'm still on the thing of why he did it. He hasn't really given me a straight answer. And I think that's the reason why I continue to accept his calls, just to see, why he would do that. We weren't together.
Mm-hmm. And he's never given any type of. Has he apologized? Has he said he's?
Yeah, he's apologized to me, but he's never talked anything to my sister.
Your little niece is the one that he attacked, right?
Yeah, she's my older one. I think that it really affected her a lot because she was the oldest. She was 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then my other niece was 2, and then my daughter was 1. And, she would, every now and then she'd tell me, Auntie, I saw you laying on the floor and you were naked.
Mm-hmm.
But she was talking about my mom.
Right. So she remembers.
Yeah, she remembers little bits.
Gosh, Carol, you guys have really been through it.
Yeah, we have.
I mean, it's just something you just don't ever think is going to happen in your family, but it does happen in families,
Yeah.
I think it'll still be, this is kind of just the first step when the state files the paperwork. I mean, it's still going to be a while, before this goes forward. Are you going to continue to talk to him? Will you go to Salt Lake when it happens? What's your relationship like?
Well, right now, our relationship is just cordial.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't, like I said, I guess I'm keeping our communication open just to where he can get in touch with our daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And then, right now she's old enough to know, that she could, talk to him or not talk to him. She's really feeling the what do you call it, brood end of it, I guess. Or,
yes.
Because, that's her dad, but then it also too was her grandma.
Oh.
So, and it's hard because, my mom's side of the family is really judging, and I don't know, they take it out on her.
On your daughter?
Yeah, cause at the beginning, yeah, so she didn't really like that.
They kind of saw her maybe as part of him.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I guess you could say I'm on the fence because I want him to be there because we've got a granddaughter. And
yes.
He's never met her. And, and that's where I'm stuck on the fence because, yeah, I want him to pay for what he done to my mom, and I still want to know why. And then on the other hand, too, it's, my granddaughter's going to be out of her grandfather, but she don't really know him. She's talked to him.
Yeah.
But he don't, know her.
Right.
My mom enrolled me here with my dad's tribe, but when that happened to my mom, I wanted to, honor her, so I relinquished from here and I went to Utah.
Oh, I love that.
And right now they have the MMWI, or is it MM?
Yeah, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they, do her every now and then with
Yep.
them.
Not only are you guys from my hometown and this happens in Cedar, but I want to focus on it because, I want to make sure I'm covering the Indigenous, the problem with Indigenous women. It's a big problem.
Yeah.
Again, I want to thank Carol. I want to send love from our community to the family. I don't have any idea what it's like to live with something like this, and I hope you are all doing the best that you can. The other thing that I'm hopeful for is that the justice system listens to the family first and foremost. Carol and her family should be the people, the voice that everyone is listening to right now. Like I said in my rant earlier, if it doesn't involve you and you're not in the group that is directly affected by what is going on in any situation, stand back, close your mouth, and listen. I really hope that the judicial system is listening to Carol and her family, because those are the voices that matter. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Hit the like button if you like the video and subscribe if you want to see more from me. You can also join my Patreon. For a few dollars a month, you help keep the episodes coming. And in the end, we have a big goal. This is the thumbnail for the video on my channel that explains all the details about our fundraiser. We are raising money to donate to police departments that have cold case DNA in storage that has never been tested. There are thousands of sexual assault kits sitting in refrigeration that have never been checked. We want to raise the money, vote on the case, donate the money, and get that kit tested. The best outcome, of course, is that we solve the crime. But the worst outcome is still great. We get that perpetrator's DNA in the system, and it's there forever. If they've committed other crimes or commit other crimes, we might help with those too. We've only raised about 30% of what we need to get the first kit tested, so please donate to that if you can. I want to thank you for watching, and I want to thank you for understanding me and putting up with me when I get passionate and when I get a little bit angry. I couldn't do this for free 50 hours a week if I wasn't passionate. You know what I mean? And so the passion for me, and I guess there are people that can do it, but for me, the passion comes with the project. So I appreciate it when you put up with the passion when it comes out as anger, because a lot of these cases do make me angry. I hope you have a great week. Take care of yourselves, stay safe, and be kind to each other. And I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.